Well, I have no slides. Have a public sector of about 103,000, and I guess I was told to kind of be a bit disruptive. I would welcome an 80-year-old working in the workforce. I suspect that that's what we'll be seeing. So when I was asked to speak about digital natives, digital strangers, I said, well, I'm not really across technology, but I am actually across the workforce, and actually having some discussions around how we grapple with a changing platform for our citizens, a public service, public sector that actually needs to set policy, and you heard the words co-design. What does that look like? The most important thing for me, and things around social media, big data, participatory budgeting, social enterprises, that's actually really quite significant for any government to actually start to think about how the institution, and we heard how many hundreds of years old it is, how that institution has to change. And I remember quite a few years ago, I was actually asked to speak about the difference or what it was like to actually manage baby boomers, Gen Ys, Gen X. And one of the things I actually said there, and I'd hope we'd pick this up, is actually I don't actually like to talk about that. I think if the key answer for that for me is leadership. And I actually think that we need to recognise the opportunity that the diversity or the richness of the different methodologies, whether it's younger people and their devices, sometimes they're not really sure about where it stops and starts, and so it's actually bringing up some new challenges. And basically finding people with the capability to be able to unlock that talent, people that actually leaders that can actually say, well, the institution needs to change. And in fact, when we talk about why we print off that bit of paper because we should do it online, is because there's someone somewhere wanting that to be signed off. So we still have quite a bit of red tape that somehow is in the system. Unless we challenge the whole system, what we actually have is people trying to do something, and in fact my biggest fear is the digital natives getting scared away, in particular from public sector, because we actually haven't had a look at it from the beginning to the end. So it's a fairly big challenge. So that's what I'm saying in my opening statement. I hope for us to explore it more. So one of the things I wanted to do in my opening statement is just to talk a little bit about what South Australia has been doing through the Change at South Australia program, and the one that I've been leading that's probably led to my appointment as Commissioner for Public Sector Employment. Be careful what you complain about. They could appoint you to the job and then ask you to fix it, which is what's sort of happening at the moment. So what Change at South Australia has done is actually nothing more than us actually, it was basically the Premier and the Chair of the Economic Development Board saying, I think we need some cultural change in the public service. And in fact, I was in another government agency, not working in a central agency, and they said, well, why don't you lead this particular program? So step one is actually to find people, doesn't matter, I guess, how old they are, what they're doing, that can actually make changes and be innovative. And through a series of 90-day projects, short ones, that will demonstrate that the public sector can find new ways of working and can bypass the layers of bureaucracy, and basically move in each of those projects to what we call digital by default. So what was really quite surprising in that, or not surprising I guess to me, it wasn't necessarily the digital natives that actually came up with the solutions. It was because we co-designed with these projects. So none of these projects were done without involvement of either business or citizens that were affected by them. And basically together, we actually defined a problem and basically came up with a solution together. Often in government what we do is, well, here's an app, or here's what we do, but by the way, I mean, we heard today you've got about 10 forms to fill. It's the same forms, you've just got them online, and now you can do it on your phone, but I can't read them, they're too big. So there is a whole lot around actually disrupting the whole system, and we found through these 90-day projects that the ownership of the problem shouldn't be, I guess, the public sector. And in fact, what we need to be doing is actually representing, I think, the views of the citizens that we serve, and actually how do you truly get that public value and that engagement. So speak to the customers, that's what we did with the projects, and explore best solutions. And most important, we got some great outcomes, and I'll share some with you. But most important is that we realised the barriers around doing things in government. We do have lots of really great silos, they're very healthy. We interrogated the procedures that we had, we challenged the norm, and like everyone else in this room, we actually tried to reduce red tape, and we did. We had about 700 what we called simplify red tape ideas. I heard today that there were others. The issue is the moment you start to unpack to try and undo all that red tape, you get hit with more. So it's about actually saying, I'm going to stop doing it. And so I've decided to stop doing some things as long as I don't get put into jail. So I keep saying to my people, if I don't sign this, does it mean that I actually have to go somewhere? We're not, they're still very nervous about me not signing things. So Change at South Australia now has completed 63 projects, no extra staff. It's 63 different projects that now have been driven from people from outside of government, suggesting in about what needs to change. And we've just embarked on another 5. But we do have over 100,000 employees. We need for this to actually go viral. Some of them have focused on digital solutions, and we have used the principles of digital by default. And we've noticed even over the last 2 years that more and more of the problems we tackle are finding digital solutions, but they're doing them on their own. The outcome of this is that more and more public sector employees have a safe place, and I think this is an important point, to explore the opportunities presented by digital. Sometimes they're quite scary because in fact jobs won't be needed to be doing something. You can actually do that either online and the rest of it. And when anyone here, and certainly this panel would know, works in culture change, that is quite scary. And so it actually doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's going to embrace this sort of change. And the fact that we fear failure in the public sector, and if we do, we see the examples of what happens when you make a mistake. And the Change at SA projects actually gave us a chance to actually fail, and if we did, we got out of it real quick. So in fact, a trial was just perfect. So I view any kind of program that allows innovation on the edges to be what I call a viral solution. Disrupt the norms, spread new attitudes across the sector, which we did. And we've started to create a more new dominant culture that celebrates innovation, seeks to find the best solutions and provide the best service, and we've found some great ones. And a public sector with a culture founded on those values, which we spend a lot of time on. So we need to then embed, I think, values around collaboration, about respecting diversity, because if I'm going to get into the debate about Gen X, Y, natives or strangers, we're actually pointing out, I guess, differences, and in fact, all of those differences are the citizens and community that we actually serve. So all of the, and I mentioned, all the projects have collaboration. You cannot do it on your own. It has to be with multiple agencies. We consult with industry, we engage with citizens, and we integrate a multiple of reform tools. And it has to contribute to the vision of the state. So in fact, it's okay to be, it's not okay to be doing things that really don't make a difference to anyone. So that's the other challenge we have, is actually we need to think about what is it? What do we regulate and what do we need to pull out? So just a small taste we've created. This is just through those 90-day projects, no extra investments or the rest of it. There's real-time apps that tell passengers when their next bus, tram or train will arrive and how late it will be. We've slashed processing times through the police and courts for minor offences. There was one, the Environment Protection Authority, the Primary Industry Department got together and reduced the licensing for fishermen for tuna fishing from 5 weeks to 5 days. Now, I think there's hundreds of other examples of where we can actually do that. That wasn't actually a digital solution, but it was actually talking to the people, the industry, about what actually needed to change. And some of those solutions aren't digital. So I'd like to think we're helping the industry in South Australia thrive around some of the changes that we're making through allowing, I think, people to think a little bit outside the square and actually question the role of government and regulation. One of the other iconic projects that we had, believe it or not, and it probably happens in other states, is actually nurses discharging healthy patients. So in fact, it was a 90-day project, and basically criteria-led discharge was something that would save, in terms of productivity and time, a significant amount of money. And in fact, the only reason that people said they didn't do it because they thought there'd be industrial issues either with the doctors, the ramping of the ambulance, and the nurses and doctors, and everyone was quite comfortable with it. So the challenge is for us to actually think outside the square around what can happen. We had an Unleash project that changed the government of South Australia from effectively closed government to open government. Talk about big data or open data. When we started, only 2 agencies were prepared to release their data. The other was too confidential to release. We then sent them another letter. This time it was signed by the Premier, saying, we need you to participate in the GovHack. We came back with 217 data sets from 27 organisations. So what is it that's stopping us? And it's not, we've got the data, what are we collecting it for, and how do we put it to use in terms of what I heard earlier, is how can government assist businesses and citizens to make decisions for themselves. Finally, so we can get to our next speaker, fast forward, I guess, to my role as Commissioner now, and how do we work harder at our engagement strategy? So now I'm actually faced with what do we do, I guess, and how do we, as a public sector, shift to where we need to go to enable us to collaborate better and the rest of it. Easier said than done. So the first thing that I did was actually to reissue the Code of Ethics. And one of the things that we did there was actually really consider it in terms of what I would call a mature, judgment, values-based decision-making. And also to start to introduce, I guess, the challenges of social media and basically what it is to be in the public eye, what it is for citizens to be kind of finding out about what public service does, what it is to actually open it, and actually start to set the parameters for people, no matter if they're digital strangers or they're natives. What we need to do is make sure that people are really clear about what they can and can't do and how we can co-locate and work together in a new kind of setting. And that's not going to be very easy as you try to move out of old settings to new. We need to kind of approach things with a new principle-based approach, and I would like to sort of hand on heart say that we need to get rid of the rules that actually stop us from doing things, and I know that all of you in the room will know what they are. So new patterns of engagement, simple changes to things about how we engage with community, how it becomes almost the norm for us working in government, how we reflect those new ways through our workforce and are reflective of the entire community that we serve, because in fact they are the older people that want to be served by government, as well as blurring of the boundaries between our personal and professional lives. We need to celebrate that diversity, and as a public sector, I think, how do we use, I guess, digital to be able to give people the sort of information they're looking for to have an impact on their lives and for us to be relevant for them in the next 10 to 15 years. Thank you very much.